The last unit kind of gave us a overview of where the auxiliary emergency communicator fit into the ICS system. What we're going to do now is drill down a little bit deeper and get into some more of the specific roles and responsibilities. So in this unit, we're going to be describing at the end of it the functions, responsibilities, and the roles, okay? We're talking about the AEC communicator. We're going to talk about the AEC manager and some of the differences in what the manager has to do. We're going to talk about a go kit. Everybody knows what a go kit is, right? Okay, we're going to talk about it a little bit, though. And we're going to do an exercise at the end of this. We're going to talk about SOPs, and we're going to do a little bit of an exercise on SOPs. Okay.
Yeah.
And again, getting into it, we're going to talk about some of the recommended equipment, some of the added roles. And we're going to talk first about family. Everybody says, we got to prepare, we got to be ready to go, we got to respond, okay? How many people have an emergency response plan for their family? Okay. How many exercise the plan? Okay.
Formally.
Do you have a go kit for your family?
Yes. Yes.
Okay. It's important to have a family disaster plan. It's important to have your family taken care of because you can't respond. You can't be working a 12-hour shift with your mind fully on what you're doing if you don't know what's going on with your family. Okay? I'll give you one quick example. In 2010, we had some major floods in Nashville. My house, I live north of Nashville, sits on one of the highest points in the county. It was surrounded by water. We were kind of on an island there. No power, so on and so forth. I wasn't worried about it. We have sufficient water and supplies and so on and so forth. My wife knows how to run a generator. She's self-sufficient, so I don't have to worry about it. I can be down at work and she's taken care of. Okay? What I do with her is I make sure about twice a year or so that she goes through the checklist, knows how to start the generator, knows how to refuel it, knows how to ground it, so on and so forth. Again, it's just being prepared, okay? Making sure we have enough supplies. The other thing we have is we have some written out evacuation routes in case something else happens, okay? As you may know, Tennessee is very susceptible to a large earthquake, okay? We have evacuation routes planned out in case that happens. Something everybody needs to think about so that when you deploy and you get to where you're going to be, you can be effective. Again, a go bag and a survival kit she can grab, take with her. Out-of-state point of contact and phone numbers. Okay, that's very critical. If I'm at work, she has to leave, she can't get in touch with me, how am I going to know where she went? Okay. We have 2 out-of-state points of contact that both of us will get in touch with, and actually anybody in the family that has a problem will get in touch with, so we can let each other know, we're here, we're okay, this is what's going on. The other thing we did, and this is something we found out, cell phones. We have cell phones with different area codes. Because very often, if I have like a 931 area code, and that area code is jammed up because cell phones get jammed up, a cell phone with a 615 area code will work on the same towers. So it may be advisable to get 2 different area codes. The important thing is, make sure your family's taken care of. Make sure they know what they're doing, you know what they're doing, and you can be assured that they're okay. Now, going into the AEC communicator task list and some of these things that we have to do, okay? Number 1, don't do anything. Don't take on any task on your own until you're told to do so by the supervisor. which more than likely will be who? ComL, exactly. Exactly. Don't get there and start thinking that you're just going to start setting up and doing this and doing that. Find out what you're supposed to do. When you first get notified, mobilization, right? Find out the incident name, the number, and so forth for tracking purposes. Find out where you're supposed to report to and to whom you're supposed to report. What do you need to bring? What are the travel routes? Sometimes if you're deploying particularly out of state, you may have to take some different travel routes that you wouldn't normally take to get someplace. Find out what they are. Find out if there's a staging area that you report to. Okay? What are the check-in procedures? What are the communications procedures en route? Again, that's all critical information, stuff you need to find out before you take off, before you leave. Once you get there, you check in. Why is it important to check in? And who do you check in with?
Accountability.
Accountability. Somebody needs to know you're there. Somebody needs to be able to put you to work.
And they're tracking your time.
Track time, exactly.
Liability issues, knowing you're there.
Right, liability. Again, that overall accountability picture is what we're looking at. Generally, you know, if you're the first AEC there, you're going to check in with the ComL, as we said before. If there's an AEC manager, you'll check in with him or her. But you're going to check in with somebody. A lot of times, in my experience at staging areas, you'll also get credentialed. And that's where you'll get whatever will allow you into the incident area if it's been a secured area. So you get a briefing when you get there from the manager, from the ComL. And these are some of the things that you're going to look at getting. What are the current resource commitments? What are the expectations? What are you going to do? What's the current situation? You need to know what the operating picture is. What's your expected duration? Are you going to be here a day, 2 days, 5 days? What are you ready for? When are you going to demobilize? As Jason mentioned before, thinking about demobilization starts when you mobilize. And then again, what are the current operating procedures and policies? You may be going into another state that has some really different procedures and policies from what you're used to doing. They may have different ways of working on their repeaters, whatever it happens to be. You need to find those things out. Best way to do that, get a hold of the current SOPs. Find out what they've got. Do they have an SOP for repeater usage, an MOU for repeater usage? What is it? What does it say? What can you do with it? Find out your task assignment, your work schedule, and where you're going to be working. Why do you think it's really important to find out the work schedule?
And when to show up?
Who said know when to show up? Exactly. Exactly. Know when to show up. That's important. You may get there and your work schedule may be 12-hour shifts, but you may not be starting till 6 o'clock that night. And you don't need to be there 4 hours, 5 hours early, adding to the chaos and confusion, particularly of an initial incident. Okay, another thing you need to do is install equipment when you get there. A lot of places will already have equipment installed, particularly if you're going into an EOC. A lot of them have equipment already installed. But you may need to bring equipment and install it. Again, you talk with the ComL, you find out where it's supposed to go. That goes back to the previous slide about workspace. What's your workspace going to be? Okay. Is the workspace suitable? Okay. The ComL may not be that familiar with auxiliary communicators and what we need and what our requirements are for equipment. So he may have figured out a workspace for you that's just totally not conducive to working in. Okay? So again, talk with the COML, you find out what equipment you can use, what they need, what you brought with you, and how that meshes together. Then you install the equipment and you test it. Okay? And you make sure, based on what the task assignment is, based on what the situation is, you make sure it's compatible with the systems you're going to be supporting. If you're going to be supporting Civil Air Patrol, if you're going to be working with, you may be also a Mars operator, you may be working with WinLink, whatever it happens to be. Local repeaters, make sure that you got the right tones, that you can hit the repeaters, so on and so forth. Those things all have to be tested. What you don't want to do is walk in there and, okay, I'm here, I'm going to solve all your problems, set the equipment up, and they expect you to start operating, and it's, oh, wait, I can't hit that repeater. Oh, wrong tone here. You don't want to do that. You don't want to do that. Test everything out first. Make sure it's working, and then tell them you're operational. Again, you want to look at the installation priorities. You may think that it's really, really important to get an HF net up and operating. But that COML may need you to get something working on a repeater. So find out what the installation priorities are. And again, they'll be set by the COML or the AEC manager in conjunction with the COML. Programming radios, cloning radios. A lot of times, again, this is if you deploy, you'll go to another county and they may have a certain set of repeaters that's pretty standard for their handhelds. Okay, well, you may need to clone yours or program yours to match their set. Okay, get that done. These are all different things, along with a whole bunch of other stuff, that the AEC communicator really needs to do and needs to be thinking about and needs to accomplish. Other things that can happen. Assist with distribution of equipment. How many people have a, say, a cache of handhelds? Okay, all right. We have a cache of 50 handhelds, and we've got them all programmed and so on and so forth beforehand. But somebody has to give those out, okay? And somebody has to train people on them, because you may have an ICOM handheld that you know inside and out, but if you come down to work, for me, for instance, we've got the ASU VX6Rs. You may not be familiar with it. So I've got to have somebody there that can train you, basic training on the radio, okay? And inventory. If I'm going to give out 50 radios, I want them back. I mean, you guys may like to walk off with them, but I really like to get them back. It kind of helps. And all of that, but come inventory time, keeps me out of trouble. So, again, that AEC communicator can very definitely be asked strictly to give out equipment, maintain accountability. That comes under that other duties as assigned. You know, you may not be at an incident and get on the radio. This may be your function. But again, it's a critical function, something that needs to be done. You may be tasked to come up and establish the AEC Communication Center. Okay. Again, you're going to work with the AEC manager, the COML, and again, the logistics section chief may have something to say about this, but you're going to find out where it's going to be. Some of these things are a little bit obvious here, but why do you want to make sure that you're away from RF and electronic interference? Exactly. If you can't communicate, You got noise all over your signal, you're not doing any good. Okay. Obviously, keep generators away from the radios. You know, there's the exhaust issue. It's also a noise issue. And we talked earlier about field day. How many times at field day do you put that generator right next to the tent? We've all done it, right? Okay. Getting supplies. That may not seem like a whole bunch, but again, getting those supplies that are necessary. ICS forms, pencils, pads, water. Okay. Finding out where food is going to be, when is it going to get there, what's the procedure for distributing it. In a field environment, when you deploy, these things become very, very important. You're working a 12-hour shift, it goes a lot better if you can eat. Okay, you'll have additional people coming in. You may be required to track who's arriving, when are they getting here. We talked earlier about people deploying and being en route and having the ability to communicate, you know, what are the telephone or radio frequencies. Well, that may be part of it. You may be manning a net that's strictly for check-ins and arrivals at the staging area. But again, you're going to verify that time of arrival, you're going to know what's coming in, you're going to feed that information back to the AEC manager or the COML so they have a good idea of what resources are available, when are they coming in. And then again, schedules, so on and so forth, they're set based on operational requirements. That sounds like a huge ton of things to do. But if you think about it, it's simply a logical progression of the things that we normally do. Just put it in a NIMS ICS context, and it'll make sense. It'll follow through. Okay. Inside the ACC, direct radio telephone traffic to proper destinations. How do you find out what the proper destination is? It's great to get a piece of traffic in that says, you know, 200 cots are needed at such and such shelter. But then who do you give it to? What would you do with it? Anybody?
If it's local,
Go ahead.
Maps.
Go ahead.
if it's local, you can determine, you move it up the line or across to the appropriate agency, for example. Or if it's not local, you can put it through the structure that you may have set up. It might be the NTS or some other structure that's been set up.
Or your acquisitions person under a log.
Okay. Generally what you'll do, you work at an incident or an EOC, okay, you're going to find out, you're going to ask questions. Who does traffic go to? Who's the action person? You know, am I just going to hand it off to one of the operations personnel and let them handle it? Do I handle it to logistics? Or do I just stick it in this basket and somebody comes by and picks it up? What happens with it? Where does it go? What's the destination? Okay. Once you find out, once you determine this, then you have to make sure you get it to that right destination. You know, if you're told that every time something comes in requesting stuff, it goes to this basket, make sure you do that every time. And if it's people, it goes to that basket, whatever way it is. But you need to make sure that the traffic gets to the right destination. It doesn't do any good if it sits there on your desk or your operating position. Document it on the ICS forms, okay? That's basically keeping a traffic log. You know, if you've ever been in net control, and I'm sure everybody pretty much has, what do? You keep a log of traffic, okay? Or you have somebody logging for you, which is even better, okay? Same thing, you document what's going on. The other thing you do is there's an ICS Form 214, which is and we're going to get into these a little bit later, but it's basically a daily activity log. And you'll also document activities on that. What time you set up, what equipment you use, maybe problems you ran into, how you solve them, whatever it happens to be.
Significant issues.
Significant issues, exactly. Okay. But you got to do the documentation. You've got to have all this stuff in writing. You know, one of the things that I tell folks is, if it's not in writing, it didn't happen. So if you're doing the AAR, the after action report, and somebody comes and says, well, I remember sometime around maybe this time we did this. Is it in writing? If not, it didn't happen. So again, the documentation is critical. The routing procedures, again, that ties in with the first bullet. Follow those routing procedures, find out what they are. Don't just make up your own. Talking about system problems, documenting it, significant issues, using that ICS 214. And set up a file system. You know, especially if it's going to be a longer duration event, you're going to want to be able to file stuff daily or by operational period or wherever you decide to do it. But set up some sort of filing system. It may be that you just, file it on a computer. That's okay too, however you want to do it, but make sure that you have some sort of filing system. And again, you're going to coordinate resources. Okay. Why would you want to let the AEC manager know about excess equipment?
Might be useful somewhere else in the deployment.
Exactly. Exactly. Very, very important. And deficiencies, of course, you may need equipment from someplace else. Accurate records, and this goes back to that inventory we talked about, okay? Keeping track, and perhaps you can come up with your own system, and there are several systems we'll talk about a little bit later for accountability and keeping track of where things are, okay? If you have the capability of using a Google Maps program and putting pins where the equipment is, that's a quick, easy way of doing it. Works nice. Okay. Accountability system could be something as simple as T-cards. And again, we'll show you one of those later on. But it's a real easy way of tracking the equipment. That's low tech, very low tech, pencil and paper, or cardboard, but it's accurate, it's handy, it's quick, and it works. Now there's one right there. That's what a T-card is. Okay. What you do is you have the equipment on there, serial number, so on and so forth. Somebody signs for it. When they bring it back, sign that it's back in, you can track where things are. Especially if you've got a box with several radios in it, you just put a T-card in when the radio goes out. Makes it simple.